Welcome back, everybody. We're here to talk about assessment, how you can determine what supports your students are going to need to really succeed in this differentiated instruction classroom. This is a recap. So far we've talked about the environment, how to make students feel comfortable, the curriculum, how to make sure students are working towards achievable, cogent goals, and now we're on assessment. Specifically, how do we know as teachers what our students are capable of doing and already know? And this is my favorite Far Side comics. I'm laughing because it's just so silly. They can't realize, hey, they're talking in Spanish. Come on, dude. But when we don't reasonably assume, when we can't mine our students for data, we look just like these scientists. So first, let's talk about what makes improper assessment and proper assessment in the differentiated classroom. First, I gotta tell you, the stress of grades and time tests can flood students' bloodstreams with cortisol. And that's that neurochemical I mentioned during the environment video. Really inhibits higher order thinking, makes students really feel on edge. I know you've had students that are specifically like test phobic. They panic when they're doing time tests. That's one of the many reasons that we actually stress not necessarily grading assessments. Use it as sort of a check-in, a diagnostic tool. Now, students in most assessment-driven classrooms, I'll take a step back. When people think of assessment, they think of standardized tests, they think of quizzes. The problem there is similar to the problem of short-term memory I discussed in the curriculum video. Students in most assessment-driven classrooms, they'll learn the facts for the tests, but then they'll just purge them from their short-term memories. But students are more likely to excel on these types of assessments if they're aligned with learning goals and can thus activate the parts of their brain responsible for memory retention and long-term memory retrieval. So given that background, let's talk about how to apply assessments in the English classroom. So my first tip: align assessments with the learning goals of the unit. In particular, make comments on written assignments within the context of those goals. If you're studying native son and you want to understand Bigger Thomas's fear of the color white and what that represents, our student assignments or assessments, are they discussing that? Are they mentioning that in the text? Are they analyzing it? Because when you make those comments within the context of what you're ultimately trying to achieve, students will pick up on that and they will do the work. Now, that doesn't mean that for assessment, just because I say that you shouldn't grade assessments, that doesn't mean that you can't vary them up. I think that for concrete facts, a multiple choice assessment would be appropriate. But when it comes to more abstract thinking, something like an essay or a discussion would be much more appropriate. And I gotta say, just as eliciting personal connections can help with curriculum, it can be a particularly good way to assess where students are. Are they conceptualizing the issues in the book in a way that aligns with the learning goals? Are they understanding the main plot and able to make reasonable assumptions and inferences that, again, support the learning goals? So don't just have discussions that, to borrow a term from Dr. Tomlinson, involve a bunch of chasing rabbits and don't really go anywhere. Discussions are great, but again, that connection between curriculum and assessment, you need to be able to focus your assessments on the goals spelled out in the curriculum. Likewise, a proper curriculum depends on proper assessments. In order to give students the scaffolding and learning supports or challenges that will help them grow, we need to determine where they are. So again, we see that interplay between assessment and curriculum. Can't stress enough how crucial it is to get these, to show the interplay among these categories. Now, in addition to there are different types of assessments. There are pre-assessments, which you take as a diagnostic tool, just to see where students are, where they're coming from. You can also assess something called a formative assessment, which is midway through the course, say, in the middle, you want to do like a check-in to see how students are progressing. And finally, there are summative assessments. That can be a paper, that can be a project, to really sum up the learning. And I would say, I know I said earlier you shouldn't grade assessments. If you treat a final project as a summative assessment, you can grade it and that's fine. I wouldn't just make a lot of grades hinge on pre-assessments or class discussions. Again, you don't want to stimulate cortisol in your students' brains. You don't want to stress them. You want to, again, encourage them on that growth-based path. And that involves not grading these assessments, but using them as diagnostic tools. Some great ways to do that are learning contracts, raft exercises, and please check out the supplementary material for these videos for more information on what those are. Now, I gotta say, this book, Reluctant Disciplinarian, I'll leave you with this, really influenced me quite a bit when I was a younger teacher. And I liked how Mr. Rubenstein advocated that teachers begin the year with a very conventional assessment. Wants kids to do really well on a quiz. They want to think, hey, this guy can teach. He wants them to feel comfortable. So based on what we've talked about so far, and feel free to talk about curriculum and environment as well, I think it's pretty fitting here, how does Mr. Rubenstein's formative assessment reflect the principles of differentiated instruction? I think this is a very solid job, particularly for somebody who's probably not exposed to this line of thinking. However, what additional adjustments would you make to fit it into the philosophy of differentiated instruction? Can't stress that enough, folks. Differentiated instruction isn't just a bunch of techniques, not just a bunch of instructional materials, it's a philosophy. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you next for instruction.